Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known, fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your two wolves with its paw stuck in a trap of weird facts. That wasn't grammatic. I don't think that one was even close to being grammatically
that was great.
correct. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh.
And Jordan, today we're talking about one of the most beloved films of the last 35 years. A modern Italian classic that for once doesn't turn my people into too much of a punchline. Many punchlines, but they're affectionate ones. Whatever. Much like Cool Hand Luke, is there anyone who doesn't love Moonstruck? I don't want to know.
No one in this house.
Keep him away from me. No, I don't want him around me. Because if you don't, what the hell's wrong with you? This is one of my family's big comfort watches, like growing up, but I don't think I watched it until like I was an adult, because I was always like, they're watching the Cher rom-com again. It is not a romantic comedy. It is obsessed with death.
Yeah.
And very much fixated upon death and the terrible, weird things that people do because they're afraid to die.
Yeah, Pauline Kael summed it up perfectly, as she always did. She described Moonstruck as rose-tinted black comedy that's a giddy homage to our desire for grand passion.
Yeah, and I was busy watching Rumble in the Bronx in the basement. But man, it's sweet, it's sappy, it's funny, it's a little bit sad. It's got Cher, Nic Cage, Danny Aiello. Jordan, your thoughts on Moonstruck?
Oh, yeah, this movie's great. It's weird. I was always aware of it, but for some reason, like you, I never actually sat down to watch it until the pandemic. I think pandemic freshman year.
Oh, the great coronavirus rediscovery of Moonstruck.
Yeah, I had no idea that was a thing until researching this episode, but apparently I was very much not alone in watching Moonstruck during the pandemic. Vulture called it, quote, the morbid spaghetti rom-com we all need right now. And the New York Times editors even echoed the sentiment, saying that under lockdown, the film became a solve to many. I guess it's a good comfort watch. This was a big one for my mother, who was Sicilian and grew up in a very loud Sicilian household, but the type of loud Sicilian household where the women didn't really yell back in my memory. So I think there was something cathartic for her about seeing Cher talking back to all these loutish men. And Cher was always revered in my household. I know my mom was in high school when the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour was on, and I always got the sense that she looked up to her like a cool big sister. So she got a big kick out of Moonstruck. I can't tell you the number of times she did the snap out of it bit if I was bummed or something as a kid. I don't think I realized until later that it was a reference to Nic Cage confessing his love for Cher. I just thought it was snap out of being bummed out until I was in my 30s. Moonstruck, for those who need a quick refresher course of the sometimes convoluted farcical plot, follows the trials and tribulations of Loretta Castorini, played by Cher, a 30-something widow who agrees to marry Johnny Camilleri, mostly out of common sense more than anything else. And then she meets his brother Ronnie, who's a brutish but passionate baker who lost his hand, played by Nic Cage, and he sets her soul aflame. And then there's Loretta's philandering father, her long-suffering mother, played by Olympia Dukakis, her grandfather, who's a little too obsessed with dogs, and a socially hopeless NYU professor, played by the dad from Frasier. Did I sum that up okay? Am I missing anybody big?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, cool.
Chrissy, bring me the big knife. That's my favorite line from this.
It is an endlessly quotable movie. That is true.
Yeah. Well, from the rough-and-tumble Bronx playwright who penned the script, to the iconic New York shooting locations, to the near fistfights that erupted on set, to the one, the only, Cher. Here's everything you didn't know about Moonstruck. Moonstruck screenwriter John Patrick Shanley was born into an Irish-American family in the Bronx. His mother worked as a telephone operator, and his father, who's an immigrant, was a meat packer. The neighborhood, he told the New York Times Magazine in 2004, was extremely anti-intellectual and extremely racist, and none of this fit me. I was in constant fistfights from the time I was 6. I did not particularly want to be. That's a great one, 2 sentence. People would look at me and become enraged at the sight of me. I believe that the reason was that they could see that I saw them, and they didn't like that. This guy is a quote machine, as we will discover.
Yeah.
I also didn't realize until I was researching this, he wrote Doubt.
What?
One of the most, like, crippling, like, Irish Catholic Oscar bait.
Philip Seymour
Meryl Streep,
Hoffman?
Viola yeah.
Whoa,
Yep.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah. This is an interview he gave to Vulture in 2020. He said, I was like, I want to be a poet. That was about the most unrealistic thing a kid whose father was a meat packer and whose mother is a telephone operator could come up with. What's more, I didn't want to just be any poet. I wanted to be Cyrano de Bergerac. And his youth is filled with these, like, really... Dickensian is a word that keeps coming up a lot in the Too Much Information archives, but that's the word for it. He went to a Cardinal Spellman High School, which was run by Irish Christian brothers who, he said, they beat children with their fists. I saw a 220-pound brother put a little gangly boy, against a wall and hit him in the stomach as hard as he could. But, he told Vulture, by going out in the world, I found many of the things that I sought. When I wrote Moonstruck, I was in an Irish and Italian neighborhood. I would go to the Italian-American households, and the woman serving me dinner had 3 buttons on her blouse undone and was handing me a bowl of pasta. That's, again, playfully stereotypical here. It's all in good fun. I was like, this is a lot better than what's going on in my house. So I took everything from my household, which was very good talk and intellectual rigor of a kind, and everything from the Italian-American household to build something new. Shanley had written a number of plays performed off-Broadway and in London before Moonstruck, which he wrote on spec and sent to the film's director, Norman Jewison. I was, in a way, trying to get what I wanted, Shanley continued to Vulture. First of all, I wanted to describe a family that worked. He had a bad relationship with his parents. He talks about a lot in those interviews. When I thought, what would that family look like? It would look like the family that I wrote in Moonstruck. Then I wanted to be like, what would a relationship look like that I find exciting? It involved very big feelings that I had, which were described by many as more operatic than realistic. The language in Moonstruck was very stylized, Shanley told Bomb magazine. I remember somebody saying, people don't talk that way, but if he talks that way in a movie, you buy it. There's truth and not truth in that. I said, well, it's not the way all people talk, but I was on the train and I heard 2 women talking, and they were talking in the exact style of Moonstruck.
Jewison got the script with its original title, The Bride and the Wolf.
Terrible.
Yeah. Jewison said, I said, The Bride and the Wolf? It sounds like a horror film. This is him talking to the Directors Guild of America in an interview. So we had a big battle about that, and it ended up being called Moonstruck because I convinced Shanley it's about the moon. Everybody's talking about the moon. The father's talking about the moon, the full moon. We keep shooting the moon. It should be called something. What is it? She's Moonstruck. That's a good title. So we called it Moonstruck. And in his memoir, Jewison calls the original title, quote, one of the worst I have ever seen. And he asked Shanley's agent, Janine Edmonds, who else had had a chance at the dog-eared, copy-stained, well-thumbed script. Everybody, she told him. And Jewison's producing partner, Patrick Palmer, hated the script so much that he called Edmonds to yell at her for sending him such a bad script.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Hollywood was a mean place. Calling an agent to tell them you hate to berate her for sending that caliber of script to you.
Shanley, as you mentioned, is a quote machine. From the Vulture interview, he said, I had a nameless ache in my heart every time I looked at the moon when I was growing up. I couldn't believe it existed. I wanted to go there. I was floored by the specificity of it, the craters, the rough edges of it, and the light that it shone on me and everything around me that changed. Light changes everything. There's a daytime world and a nighttime world. When I was a boy, I remember telling my brother Jim that I could run significantly faster at night than I could in the daytime. What I didn't tell him was that I also thought I was a horse. I kind of don't like this guy.
I don't know how you made that through. It's just funny if you imagine him reading it. If you imagine like reading it in the in basically Nic Cage's voice.
Oh, yeah.
Like then it suddenly is thrown into clear relief. Funnily enough, speaking of hoofed mammals, Jewison actually raised cattle on his own farm outside of Toronto. He told the LA Times in 1987, I'm a farmer, so I know the moon affects animals, and I think the moon affects humans to a greater extent than most of us recognize. By way of an example, he named Steve McQueen who he directed in Cincinnati Kid and the Thomas Crown Affair, and who he said, quote, was really affected by the full moon. He did become very strange, irrational behavior, like calling at 3 a.m. and saying, I feel threatened, and running away, usually to an open place, usually out in the desert somewhere. Just Steve McQueen becoming spooked by the full moon and calling the director to say he feels threatened and running into the desert.
I feel threatened is up there with I'm taking steps.
I'm taking steps. Yeah.
Wow.
Jewison liked the snappy dialogue. He said the language certainly attracted me to the project. I like to call Shanley the Bard of the Bronx. He also liked the characters, some of which were drawn from real life. Shanley told Vulture, I was writing about versions of real people I have known and versions of myself. I mean, I grew up with 2 guys. One of them lost his hand at a bread slicing machine, and another lost his foot pushing his car off the interstate. I still know the guy who lost his foot. The guy who lost his hand died. His son contacted me and said, was my father an inspiration for Moonstruck? I said, absolutely. Actually, maybe it's Walken. Maybe that's you got to read everything in the Walken diction.
I said.
Yeah, so Shanley continued to Vulture. I flew up to Toronto, and Jewison and I acted out all the parts across the desk from each other. He got it. We had a very similar sense of humor. He didn't attempt to mess with it. Yeah, it's funny. In one of the documentaries, Jewison's like, yeah, I got this script and blah, blah, blah. And my agent said, okay, the writer wants to come up and audition with you. And he's like, he's the writer and he wants to audition. And she was like, I think he wants to read it to you, which is not really something you do. Especially this was his second script that he'd written. He was not like a known quantity. I don't know. This guy's, he's got chutzpah. I like him. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Jewison first brought Shanley's script to MGM Chief Executive Officer Alan Ladd Jr. at the 1985 Toronto Film Festival. Although Jewison was in the midst of signing a contract with Columbia Pictures at the time and was therefore required to give the studio a first look option, Columbia head David Putnam permitted Jewison to show the property to other studios, and MGM requested a deal within 24 hours. Shanley said that he did not have anyone in mind for the characters, but Jewison did, and that was the one, the only, the mother truckin' Cher. According to Ira Wells' book on Jewison from just last year called A Director's Life, MGM had lots of actresses in mind for the starring role. Demi Moore, which would have made sense, coming off all the Brat Pack stuff.
Pretty young, though. For being like a mid-30s.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the other ones then make more sense. Barbra Streisand. Liza Minnelli, which would have been a very different film.
Whoa.
And Rosanna Arquette, which would have been interesting. Cher's role in Robert Altman's Come Back to the Five and Dime Jimmy Dean, which is a long and awkward movie title. Is that one of your favorite Altmans?
No, not at all. No, I'm a match.
Perish the thought.
I don't think anyone really liked that, if I remember.
Well, the Golden Globes did because Cher was nominated for that and started getting work as an actress again for that. But apparently, again, in researching this, I just was always like, oh yeah, Moonstruck. People love Cher. Because this was where I went, this was Turn Back Time was her big mid-'80s hit. Yeah,
was that like 87, I think?
89.
89? Okay.
Yeah, so this would have been, she would have been hot then, but apparently not. In that Wells book, he finds these surveys conducted by the private firm Marketing Evaluations, who are famous for this thing called a Q score, which is their supposedly objective measure of brand appeal. That's their invention, right? Because it's always cited. So. It's always in like places, people's like Wikipedia pages.
Yeah.
And, like,
now it's like Twitter followers.
Yeah, exactly. Stephen Levitt, who is the company's president, said, she's never been as popular as she was when she was on television in 1974. My prediction, based on the data we have, is that people are not going to go out of their way to see a movie she's in.
Even Cher didn't have high hopes for this. She just finished Witches of Eastwick, and she said, as much as I liked Moonstruck, this is her talking to the LA Times, it wasn't like Mask, which I felt like I just had to do. I was a little frightened because there seemed to be all kinds of possibilities and all kinds of risks here. I wondered if, at this point in my career, when there might be some people out there interested in seeing my movies, that they might accept me in this role. Cher worked on her Brooklyn accent with Julie Bavasso, who played John Travolta's mother in Saturday Night Fever. Bavasso literally recorded all of Cher's lines in the film onto a tape recorder, which Jewison made her listen to over and over and over again. I mean, for a musician and a singer, that's kind of a good way to like get people into the rhythm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Cher said she much preferred playing the pre-makeover Loretta, saying, "The freedom is not interesting to me because that's something I know usually."
It's so funny that they were like, oh, she's like dowdy and giving up on life, and it's just Cher with like a few gray hairs. She's still like an objectively beautiful woman. Who's like rail thin and striking in every way. And they were like, just put her hair in her bun and give her like 1 or 2 grays.
Yeah, let's give her a sweater.
Yeah.
She said, "My father is Armenian and my mother is French and Cherokee Indian. And the truth is that characters in the film aren't like my family at all." This is her talking in the film's promotional packet when it was released. But the Times quoted her as saying, "It kind of reminded me of Sonny's family, Sonny Bono's family. Everybody eating and talking and shouting, but you have such good times." Sonny Bono was born in Detroit to Zena DiMercurio and Santo Bono. So, yeah, it sounds about right. Cher's mother just died the other day. Let's do this episode as a tribute to Cher's mom.
Cher's mother was still alive? Holy shit.
Yeah, she was like 92 or 96. I forget.
Wow. Cher was not convinced that the movie was going to be a hit or even good, which was apparently the mood on the set. Learning about the making of this movie, I have to say, was depressing because it was apparently... Yeah. We'll get into it. Olympia Dukakis, who plays her mother in the film, famously won an Oscar for it, which also like completely changed the trajectory of her career, told the AV Club, "As a matter of fact, one day we were sitting around talking and somebody asked Cher what she thought was going to happen with the movie, and she gave it the thumbs down. Nobody really expected too much out of it. And then look what happened. And that's because we were all stupid and didn't understand what Norman Jewison was really doing." It's widely known that Dukakis was only 15 years older than Cher in the film, but supposedly her repeated groan in the film is a nod to Dustin Hoffman's character's tick in The Graduate that he does.
It's just funny because in The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman is only 5 years younger than Mrs. Robinson's Anne Bancroft, who I believe was considered for the Olympia Dukakis role in Moonstruck. As was Maureen Stapleton, who I guess was too expensive.
And Danny Aiello, for what it's worth, is 31 years older than Nic Cage, who is supposed to be his younger brother. Oh, in the documentary about the film, Shanley says that when Jewison originally approached Cher, she straight up told him, "I think you should know I'm very difficult to get along with," which kudos to her.
I love her, like, insecure confidence is the only way I can think of to put it. Like, she seems to be so neurotic, but also so confident and also completely like okay with her neuroses. Like, I mean, the whole idea of Sonny and Cher being a duo was he wanted to make her a singer because he worked under Phil Spector and she was nervous to sing alone. He would just stand in the studio with her and stand next to her on the mic and sing with her to basically calm her down. And that's how that all started.
Yeah. And she's, she really did know what she wanted, though. I mean, the famously when she recorded "Believe," they went to one of the label heads was like, "What is that stuff on your voice? Like, you're Cher. We don't need that like effect on the voice." And she was like, "It stays, or the song doesn't come out." And she launched auto-tune as a specific effect. Yeah, and but there were reports at the time that she just did not take direction well, which has been basically verified, and that she clashed with Jewison. Olympia Dukakis even thought apparently that people close to Cher had told her not to do the film. Julie Bavasso said that there were certain things that Norman had a lot of trouble getting from Cher. But Dukakis went to bat for her. She said that ultimately she just thought it was that Cher had been through the music industry ringer, and at 40 was just like, "I am not taking shit from you, from any man." She said, "I think she's been through so much, and she's been very aware of people controlling her so that she's really on guard."
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Tom Cruise, Bill Murray, and Ray Liotta were all considered for the part of Ronnie that ultimately went to Nic Cage. those are bad.
Yeah.
Those are really bad.
But I mean, also though, how much earlier than this was Peggy Sue Got Married? Like, if you look at the guy.
Oh no, Peggy Sue Got Married was 86. Raising Arizona was the one that I was thinking of, where he's.
Oh, that makes more sense. But I was gonna say, like, I don't think I would have immediately thought of Nicolas Cage for this
As like a leading man? No, that's why it works, 'cause he's ugly.
Well, yeah.
He's ugly cute.
He's not ugly, but he's just.
No, but he's weird looking. He has that like hangdog kind of quality, and like he cleans up really well. He's so cute in his little tux with the opera scarf and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's not classically leading manish, and just a weird dude. Just a really weird dude. The funniest thing was that Jewison wrote "needs style" and "too young" next to Ray Liotta's name. And he was 10 years older than Nicolas Cage. Yeah, I kept reading this. I wasn't able to pin it down, but apparently MGM wanted Peter Gallagher, famously the eyebrows, behind
in the
Seth
OC.
Cohen's dad in the OC. Yeah. And they went as far as to screen test him, but Cher, much like with Believe in the auto-tune, she was like, it's Nic Cage or I walk. God love her.
Yeah.
Cage was just 23 years old at the time, was coming off Raising Arizona, and Peggy Sue Got Married, and he was missing 2 front teeth, which he had removed for his role in 1984's Birdie.
He had them removed? Wait, I'm reading that it says that he had them pulled out without anesthesia to better understand his character.
Nah, Nic Cage, man. God love him.
You can't get those back.
I think actors are less precious about their teeth than they're just like, just take them out, put in the porcelain, they last longer. Because Shia LaBeouf did that for one of his dumb movies. He like yanked a tooth out and like cut his face. I think it was for the Tank movie. It's so funny to me that Shia LaBeouf goes all method and weird for all this stuff, and like none of those movies make any money. All of his big box office movies are the Transformers films and Holes.
I was gonna say I don't know what he's done lately.
Well, get sued get me too'd. Cage did not want to make this movie. Funnily enough, he told the Baltimore Sun, "I read the screenplay to Moonstruck and thought I would never pay money to see this film, but my agent insisted I do it. Practically forced me to do it. When I saw the finished film, I didn't know what in the world to make of it. That was my era of wanting to make new wave alternative films. And apparently we have Moonstruck to thank for Cage's next film, Vampire's Kiss, the absolute peak Cage movie. That is where you get the popular aughts era, back when we had those things called rage comics, the You Don't Say Nic Cage meme. That's from Vampire's Kiss, from the scene in which he famously recites the entire alphabet. He also eats a live cockroach in that movie on camera. He told USA Today in 2021, "I made Moonstruck on a deal with my then agent, Ed Lamato. I was desperately trying to get him to say yes to me doing Vampire's Kiss. He said, no, you're not going to wear those stupid plastic things. I want you to look handsome. Do Moonstruck." And I said, I don't want to do Moonstruck, like a surly teen. I wanted to be punk rock. I didn't want to do a schmaltzy movie about opera. But I said, if I do Moonstruck, will you let me do Vampire's Kiss? And he said, okay.
I didn't think agents had that kind of creative sway. Like, who says they let an actor do anything? Like,
I mean, he was 23. Like, I don't know. He had the juice to be fighting over stuff like this. He just really wanted to play a vampire. And for Moonstruck, for Moonstruck, Cage did what Cage does best. Supposedly, quote, almost entirely nocturnal during shooting, according to Jewison. He patterned his character's gestures on classic German expressionist cinema, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Fritz Lang's 1927 classic Metropolis. We watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, the Nic Cage meta comedy. It's good. It's better than I gave it any credit for being. But The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a prominent plot point because he keeps trying to dragoon his teen daughter into watching it. So his obsession with that movie is real and has been fomenting for a very long time.
My favorite Nicolas Cage fact is the fact that No one ever since Elvis Presley died has been allowed upstairs at Graceland. It was basically sealed and supposedly left exactly the way it was the day Elvis died, to the point where like styrofoam cups that were just on counters and stuff were left, you know, almost like some kind of weird religious rite. But, you know, ever since Graceland was turned into a tourist attraction, Japanese prime ministers and all these high-ranking people have come to visit, and they all want to see Elvis's private quarters at Graceland, the place where he went to seek refuge from fame, and it's also the place where he died. Nobody is allowed up. Nobody, except Nicolas Cage, because he was married to Lisa Marie. He apparently went. He's like one of the only people outside the head curator at Graceland, Lisa Marie and Priscilla, who went up into Elvis's bedroom at Graceland. Apparently, I read he like tried on one of Elvis's leather jackets and like sat on the bed or something. I read some story about like what he did up there. I think I read that he like got into like the fetal position at the place where he died.
That scans. I saw his grave he supposedly bought in New Orleans. His mausoleum. His prepaid mausoleum.
I was gonna say, does he still? Because I thought he was like broke and needed to resell stuff.
Oh, I don't know if he sold that. Let's find out. Nicolas Cage, New Orleans. Have you ever seen the picture of him in the Superman costume from the Tim Burton movie?
No. Oh, this is like the third time this has come up on the show. I still never seen it.
It's just a very funny. Well, oh yeah, he still owns it. Oh, he did not sell it.
I was right. The secret visit to upstairs at Graceland took place during the week of the 25th anniversary of Elvis's death, at which time it is said that Nicolas Cage sat on the king's throne, the toilet where he died, assumed the prone position in which Elvis died, and laid on the singer's bed and tried on a leather jacket.
Weird. He built it.
The mausoleum?
Yeah, it's a pyramid that apparently cemetery historians and New Orleans people have derided as like tacky and not in keeping with the rest of the mausoleum, like the style of the graves and mausoleums.
Well, it's too clean. It looks like the back of the dollar bill. It looks like
it is inscribed with the Latin phrase "Omnia ab uno," a motto popularized by the Rosicrucians.
What's it mean?
Everything from one. Jesus, where was I? Nicholas did have a darker interpretation of Ronnie than I did, Jewess and Total Reporter, in 1988, but we both agreed that a poetic quality was central to the character.
He also called Cage the most tormented guy I could find. And I just have to add this anecdote from the Wells piece you cited earlier, the Wells book that you cited earlier. Cage also owned 2 sharks, an exotic insect collection, and a jewel-encrusted tortoise. I've always been fascinated by marine biology, Cage told Playgirl. I don't know why. It's sort of like my Bible. I have a picture of a fish in my wallet that is just going to knock your socks off.
That's so cute. Part of that interpretation of the character, Cage told the interview site The Talks, was that I wanted to talk like Jean Marais in Beauty and the Beast. He had that accent and his voice was very gravelly, and I thought of my character in Moonstruck like a wolf who spoke with a growl. And so I was talking like that in the movie, and I got a call from the director, Norman Jewison, and he said, "Nicholas, the dailies aren't working." And then I started hearing names of other actors, and I thought I was going to get fired. I had to quickly drop the Jean Marais.
What is it with Nicolas Cage and voices? Didn't he do his character in Peggy Sue Got Married? He based the voice on Pokey from the Gumby cartoons, which royally pissed off the movie's director, his uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, to such a degree that his own uncle basically vowed to never work with him again.
You know, what do you do to the bit? You commit to the bit. You don't. I think it's. I forget who's. I don't want to say it's Klosterman, but somebody was talking about. I think Bowie and Iggy Pop and the difference between them and Lou Reed, and they were like, Bowie and Iggy never blinked. Like, you know, whatever ridiculous stuff that they were doing, they were just like, nope, this is it. 100. Not a single part of me is kept it in like an arch. Winking remove to this. I'm on this train. It's going 110 miles an hour. You do not have the option to derail it or reroute it. Whereas Lou Reed was a little bit more like, I have this conflict. I'm kind of like a little, that was like part of his bit. And Nic Cage does not blink, man. He makes choices. He commits to the bit. Despite the chemistry that he had with Cher on screen, though, I don't really think they liked each other. Cher told Newsweek in 1987, I don't know if Nicky will ever be a huge mainstream actor. He takes unbelievable chances, and personally, I think he's crazy. Sometimes he's a blast on set. Other days, I'd get real peeved at him. And Cage, despite admitting to having loved Cher when he was 10...
I mean, who among us?
told Newsweek in that exact same interview, I do think Cher needs a good director. Otherwise, she's trouble. Folks, your romantic leads. There's a guy, the guy who plays the grandfather, who's just like yelling in Italian all the time and walking around with his dogs, is a guy named Fyodor Chaliapin Jr. Ad-libbed everything he says to the dogs in the movie. And there's a great bit. If you ever wanted to see an old Jewish man impersonate Sean Connery, it's in the documentary about this movie. Before he cast this guy, Jewison called Sean Connery, who had worked with this actor in The Name of the Rose. And Sean Connery told Jewison, he cannot see, he cannot hear, and he'll steal every bloody scene in the film. And this guy was deaf. He was losing his hearing, couldn't hear what the other actors were saying in the film, and would just get Jewison said he just timed everything in his cues by watching the other actors' lips, and when they stopped talking, he would just jump in. Incredible.
I just want to add something just to you before we continue. Kathleen Turner, in her memoir, speaks of Nicolas Cage. He caused so many problems. He was arrested twice for drunk driving, and I think once for stealing a dog. He'd come across a chihuahua he liked and stuck it in his jacket. On the last night of filming, he came into my trailer, and he'd clearly been drinking heavily. He fell to his knees and asked if I could ever forgive him. I said, not right now. I have a scene to shoot. Excuse me, and just walked out. Nicholas didn't manage to kill the film, but he didn't add a lot to it either. For years, whenever I saw him, he'd apologize for his behavior. I'd say, look, I'm way over it. But I haven't pursued the idea of working with him again.
Wow. I don't think I realized he was like arrested.
Apparently twice. At a career retrospective in New York in 2011, Jewison explained that the film's climactic scene was going very poorly on the set. Nicolas Cage apparently threw a chair at another actor who you say is Danny Aiello?
Yeah, apparently one point during the filming of this scene, Danny Aiello clutched his testicles and screamed at Nic Cage, "You got to give it to me from here," which is a very Italian, the Italian man thing to do.
Yes. Meanwhile, Cher was threatening to report Norman Jewison to the Screen Actors Guild because he kept them working through lunch. He later said, I told her something authoritative, like, we'll break when we get it right. Well, a lot of bad manisms being thrown around the set on this day.
Yeah.
And then Fyodor, the guy playing the grandfather, achieved peace by saying, calma, calma, calma. This is a Fyodor farce. And in a Fyodor farce, we pull everything together in the last scene. And Jewison said, we did it again and everything fell into place. And as you mentioned, that would be the 19th century French playwright, Georges Feydeau.
Georges Feydeau. I have no idea who that is. I just love the idea that this dude just calmed an entire room of actors by addressing a 19th century French playwright. Olympia Dukakis told the AV Club, well, we were in the car, Jewison and I, and he had asked me to come to do a benefit for him in Canada. He was going to show Moonstruck and he wanted me to come. And I was so grateful to him for that experience and so admiring of him that I went. And he said, you're going to get an Academy Award for this. And I looked at him like he was stark raving mad. Dukakis tells this story about how Julie Bavasso blew up at Cage at one point when they were refusing direction. And he told her to go herself, to which Bavasso retorted, well, I haven't had to do that in a long time. And then Cage threw a cup of coffee on the table, which splashed on Olympia Dukakis, and Bavasso told her that was God's punishment for not speaking up and backing up Jewison against Cage and Cher. Italians, man. Norman Jewison calls Olympia Dukakis Limpy, which is really, really adorable and kind of a weird nickname. And said that she was the person who ended up backing him. She would go to bat for him whenever he was dealing with Cage and Cher.
My girlfriend took a few acting classes with Olympia Dukakis a few years ago. Her really good friend and our NYU classmate was Olympia's protege, actually, and she's now a very talented acting teacher who runs her own school where Olympia was doing some classes just before her death. And not to speak out of turn, but my main thing I remember hearing was that Olympia was one tough lady. That's the main thing I remember from Tales.
You got to give it to me from here.
Pretty much, yeah. Anyway, who among us?
Danny Aiello, who is just 2 years away from his starring role in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, said on the Diane Rehm radio show in 2014 that he couldn't stand the character I played, which is funny because he is such a beta loser.
Yeah.
He continued, Norman, when I told him that I couldn't stand the character, he said to me, "Are you crazy? You're wonderful. But in my neighborhood, you can't play a wimp on the screen. People didn't even know me as an actor, but to see me as they didn't know me was troubling in the area where I live. So it did adversely affect me at first. All I know is I was stupid looking on the screen." Well,
he kind of seems like a dick.
He very much does. His friendship with Spike Lee is so adorable. There's a really funny video of him and Spike hanging out. Spike Lee just loves him as this ridiculous Italian dude. But they're telling all these stories, and Danny Aiello will kind of walk back his Italian American racism at the time, and then Spike Lee's like, "No, you got to tell him what you really called me the first time we met."
Well, he died 3 years ago exactly today.
No. R.I.P.
Yeah, we'll see. See how this episode goes. Danny Aiello also felt that Cher should have picked him over Nicolas Cage. Of course, even if it's fake, you can't let this fake defeat enter in your consciousness. I said, "Do you think Nicolas Cage is going to get a woman that I have?" I said, "That's not going to happen." I said, "Cher would be with me from the beginning." God. Despite not liking the role, he said it earned him more money and it, quote, elevated a lot of other parts for me in comedic situations and so forth.
Yeah, he's talked about he's by his own admission, being very combative on set. And so it's just so, imagine him and Nicolas Cage coming to blows in a tiny Brooklyn kitchen is so funny to me.
In front
John
of
Mahoney,
Cher and Olympia Dukakis.
Yeah, in front of Cher.
Not in front of Cher.
John Mahoney, who was famously Frasier's dad, just steals the. I love that scene with him and Olympia. That little walk that they do, and he's like a skirt chaser. So he's like, "You want to let me in to your house?" And she's like, shuts him down. They have such wonderful chemistry. That's such a well-written movie.
How did they end up? I forget. I'm forgetting how that little.
She just
arc goes.
sends him away.
No, but I mean, is that all we hear from his character? I'm trying to remember what
he doesn't come back. He doesn't come back in the movie. It's just this little, because you see him in the restaurant twice, and then he just ends up he just walks her home. Yeah, it's so great. He was born in Manchester.
Yeah. He was old. He lived there for a while, right?
But completely lost the accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was an English teacher and edited a medical journal until he was 37. And his students were like, "Yeah, you should go pursue this acting bug that you have." And until Moonstruck, he won a Tony, which is wild to me, but he was basically a character actor. He'd only done 3 movies. He did Tin Men with Richard Dreyfuss and Danny DeVito, Manhattan Project with John Lithgow, and then Suspect with Cher, and then Moonstruck, and he said this, blew the doors open for him.
And then soon after, I think in '89, he was the dad in Cameron Crowe's Say Anything.
Oh, that's right, he is. Yeah. He's so good at just the gruff. You're instantly just like, yes, dad.
Yeah. He told the UPI, "Moonstruck was my breakthrough in pictures. The restaurant scene was an actor's dream. It completely changed my career. For the first time, audiences were able to see me as I really look. I never envisioned in a million years the movie would be so great or that my role would have so much impact. I thought it was a nice little cameo role. Fortunately, I auditioned with Olympia. Norman knew he wanted her for the film immediately. And prior to Frasier, he said that was the role that he was the most approached about," which makes sense.
I would love to talk with him about being Frasier's dad. Despite its status as one of the all-time great New York movies, more on that in just a second, production shot most of Moonstruck's interiors in Toronto. They constructed soundstage replicas of the Castorina family brownstone, the Grand Ticino restaurant, Ronnie's apartment above the bakery, and the scene in which Cage and Cher are actually watching La Boheme was shot in Ontario. That's not actually the Met. Parts of it are shot at the Met, but the interior, the one interior scene in there is at the Markham Theatre in Ontario.
Yeah, apparently the movie originally opened with a song from La Boheme, but it performed badly in test screenings because the crowd heard it and thought they'd been duped into attending an art film. So they replaced it with Dino doing That's Amore, because what's the most stereotypical song we got?
I was about to say, what's the most borderline offensive thing we could throw in here? What would the other one be?
I was trying to think. I mean, Volare is like the other one.
Yeah, or like the Tarantella.
Yeah, I would say something about Connie Francis.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. The film's climactic scene, in which Runtagh gives an impassioned post-opera speech to Cher and convinces her to come back to his apartment with him, was the last one that they shot in Brooklyn. And Cage said, "The only thing I remember on that movie was Cher and I freezing in Brooklyn in the winter at night. It was that whole big diatribe about the snowflakes are perfect, the stars are perfect, not us. We are here to ruin ourselves." That was my favorite bit of writing by John Patrick Shanley, this powerful soliloquy. That being said, our mouths were frozen, and it was so hard to move. It's very hard to act when you're freezing.
Talking to The Cut in 2022, Cher expanded on that scene. She said, "I was really crying because it was so cold that our lips were turning blue. In a doorway, they kept a space heater for me, and I got too close to it and set the back of my coat on fire. I still have that coat. It's singed. The moment people smelled something coming from where I was, they stepped in. They were like, 'She can't go up in flames until we finish the film.'" Cher also still has the jeweled red heels that she wore in the film. She told the New York Times in 2020 that she went to see the film in a theater, and when her character puts her foot out of the cab at Lincoln Center, she said, "This man in front of me went, 'God, she's got a long, skinny foot.' And I went, 'Oh my God, I do. How mean of him to say that when I'm sitting right behind him, even though he doesn't know it.'"
Someone made Cher feel bad about her feet.
I hate that. Oh. Speaking of that soliloquy, here's Shanley giving a typically winding anecdote about the creation of the snap out of it slapping scene to Vulture. I took this anecdote not out of my mom. "I was up in a tenement living on 177th Street in Fort Washington. I had an apartment with chunks of plaster falling out of the walls and a couple of windows that were cracked. I became very friendly with the super, a guy named Ralph. Really, I just kind of adored him. He was very short and he looked like he was from Castilian Spain. He looked like he was running in front of a bunch of bulls. He came up and would say, 'Let me fix that hole in your wall.' And I would say, 'I love that hole. Do not touch that.' He'd say, 'Let me fix that window.' And I'd be like, 'That crack in a window is a once in a lifetime. I don't want it touched.' I was very in love with the way the things are and the imperfectness which Nic Cage talks about in the snow scene when he talks her into going upstairs. I wrote the stage directions. I just acted it, pictured it in my head. So I slapped him. And I looked at him and it didn't work. So I slapped him again and said, 'Snap out of it.'"
And then the interviewer says, "When you say you slapped him, you were talking about an imaginary person."
"I'm talking about me. I do the one part, then I turn around and I do the other."
You slap yourself.
Yeah, I do that a lot. This guy seems a little too into the process for my liking. He seems a little too into his own words.
You just can't.
I don't like him.
Trying to think what else he's written other than there's a lot. Like
then 2 Oscar-nominated movies?
Yeah, I was going to say what. Oh, and a Pulitzer and a Tony.
Oh, all right, fine.
I was going to say, this picture on his Wikipedia page is so funny because it's like he heard you talking about him, and now click on it and look at his expression. That's the face of a Pulitzer winner who just heard you talking
been
shit.
doubted. Yeah.
New York City filming locations included the Casa Italian Bakery on 9th Avenue, the Grand Ticino Restaurant in the West Village, the TWA Terminal at Kennedy Airport, and the Metropolitan Opera House in Lincoln Center. Those scenes were filmed with over 300 background actors, while hundreds of real-life Lincoln Center audience members filed out of the theater after an actual performance. Sadly, the Grand Ticino restaurant lost its lease in August of 2001, was forced to close after 82 years.
Ooh,
It is now
that's rough.
called Cafe Clooney on West 12th and was used more recently in the Jennifer Aniston starring movie Switch. I'm pretty sure I've been in Cafe Clooney. I found it unremarkable. I probably would have liked it a lot more had I known it was the Grand Ticino. The real-life bakery in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn that stood in for the Camerieri shop was hilariously not owned by the actual Cameraris, but by Gilberto Godoy, who is a Argentinian immigrant to whom the family sold their bakery in 1985.
Well, I didn't know that was a famous, like, it's the equivalent of
Actual
like
Brooklyn, yeah.
landmark. Yeah, I'd never heard of that until, I mean,
Well, I think it was
knew
gone by the time we were there, like
Yeah.
everything. Jewison told the New York Times in 1988, "Whenever I can, I like to cast people who do the same job in real life." And he picked that particular bakery because it has one of the few coal-fired ovens left in the city. Heat and humidity are always there, and bread is always rising, and there's an incredible smell. It helps the actors to be in a real environment. So Godoy is in the film. He used to sign his autograph on bread bags. And he refused to close the bakery during filming because he had a quota of 5,000 loaves a day to maintain. So for 3 days, he just kept the bakery operating around the cast and crew. It was hysterical, Jewison said. "We had lights, trucks, cameras, Cher, and the poor guy was still baking. While they were filming, our customer barged into the shot demanding a loaf of bread, and Jewison just motioned to Cher to take the guy's money and give him a loaf of bread."
Don't Scorsese's parents have bit roles as customers in the bakery?
I don't think I knew that.
I guess if there's anything Italian related going on in New York in cinema, the Scorseses are legally obligated to be involved. I think so. His mom, like Catherine, yeah.
Yeah, she has a very specific look. It's hard to miss. Hard to miss those. Hard to miss Mama Scorsese. Yeah, I found the exact still of them. Holy crap, he really aged exactly into his dad. Godoy had a tremendous line to the New York Times from that article. "The movie stars made more mistakes than me. People rave about Cher. Listen, she ran up and down the stairs for 3 days. She never did it right. With my part, we did it in 1, 2, 3. Moonstruck made that bakery more famous and caused tourists to flock to the place. But Godoy had a Springsteenian run of bad luck in the 90s. He and his wife, Nelita, who worked behind the counter, divorced. He told the New York Times in 97 that "I was lost and emotionally and financially drained by the split." And then in 1996, one of the bakery's 2 brick ovens caught fire, was destroyed. They closed in 1998, merged with a different Italian bakery, Monteleone in Carroll Gardens. And then they opened up a bakery and cafe in Hoboken, which lasted just over a year. And then in 2013, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. According to Cranes, they owed debts to no fewer than 50 creditors. There's a Camerari's famous in Howell, New Jersey currently, but I could not find anything about its connection to this guy because there's a Brazilian volleyball player by the same name who skews the Google results, but he is a very handsome man, so that was a nice consolation prize for me.
Apparently, the original bakery equipment is still downstairs at the old bakery because it is too heavy to get rid of. The Moonstruck house, meanwhile, has become one of the most famous in New York cinema. The 4-story Federal-style brownstone at Cranberry and Willow Streets in Brooklyn Heights was built in 1829 and was owned for nearly 50 years by Edwards Ruhlman, who was instrumental in persuading the city to declare Brooklyn Heights the first historic district in New York in 1965. Ruhlman and his wife, appropriately a former opera singer, bought the house in 1961 and sold it for nearly $4 million in 2008, subsequently moving to Cape Cod. But he put the work in before that. In 1965, he quit his job at a Manhattan architectural firm to open a small shop devoted to restoration in Brooklyn Heights, eventually restoring more than 50 local buildings, including St. Anne's School. And the house was put up for sale again in 2021 for $12.85 million per the New York Post. And it was, I guess, subsequently lowered to $11 million. And Amy Schumer, of all people, wound up buying it in July of this year for $12.5 million, which is a true New York City real estate story.
I love that guy was a restoration nut. You know, that really,
that's cool,
that really
yeah.
warms the cockles of my heart. And then, of course, it inflated by value 100,000 times, and a famous comedian who's the cousin of a state senator bought it.
Oh, that's Chuck Schumer's? I didn't realize they're related.
They are the same Schumers. Yep. Really just a true New York City story. The film's giant prop moon was a modified version of a lighting grid created by British director of photography David Watkin. This guy also shot Out of Africa and Chariots of Fire. It is a large array, he created this thing, a large array of 196 tightly spaced Fey lights in a 14 by 14 square, elevated up to 150 feet on a cherry picker or crane. It was supposedly nicknamed the Wendy light because Watkin was openly gay, and Wendy was a apparently semi-affectionate nickname for him on film sets because Hollywood is a cesspool. He created this thing while filming Hanover Street in 1979 at Shepperton Studios in England because he was trying to solve the problem of night lighting on sets, and designed this thing so that it was easy to move. You raise it on a crane or a cherry picker. It only cast one shadow, and it created such intense light that whatever it was mounted on was unable to be seen. And they would put it up to like a quarter mile away in exteriors for shooting night scenes.
I'm trying to find a picture of it. I can't.
Well, you can find it. It's just a massive grid. What they did for Moonstruck was they put it behind a big fake moon.
Oh, okay.
And you would just raised it above everything. He said there was an interview he gave where he said the first time he ever used it, there was like a local English boy who thought it was a UFO, which is adorable. We talked a little bit about how they've recut the opening scene to this. There's a book that came out called Audienceology, How Moviegoers Shape the Films We Love. That's all about test screenings for different famous movies. This author, Kevin Getz, quotes MGM's Greg Foster, who recalled that early test audiences for Moonstruck were perplexed by the film's tone. They didn't laugh. The heightened dialogue kind of put them off. He described an undercurrent of tension.
From the comment cards, what became very apparent was that the moviegoers hadn't gotten the humor, Foster said. They don't know why it's funny, film editor Lou Lombardo surmised from reading the cards. We've got to show them it's okay to laugh. And originally, as we said earlier, the film's opening montage was set to Puccini, which Lombardo said was setting the wrong tone from the outset. So he swapped in Dean Martin's That's Amore, which, as you said, tell him, Heigl.
I'm trying to think of, again, what could be the only more stereotypically offensive choice. Definitely presumably they weren't able to film insert shots of little nonis stomping wine in a big vat while playing the mandolin. Or Mario, Super Mario Brothers. They were gonna use the music from Super Mario Brothers. Did I send you that clip of you sent me the clip of the guy who did the Mario voice, right?
Oh, yeah. I couldn't believe it.
They were running out of tape. They were we have 30 seconds of tape left. Give us an Italian voice. And he was like, it's me, Mario. I'm making a pizza. And they're like, good, cut, print, wrap. Probably right around the same time as this. When did Mario come out? Late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, man. Is there a book about the massive
Italian-American experience?
The Italian-American, around this time. Because it is funny. You think about, there was this, My Cousin Vinny, Goodfellas, Super Mario Brothers. Such an important piece of representation.
And then Godfather 3 belatedly swoops in.
I was going to say it, then it just all went away. Yeah. Donnie Brasco. Moonstruck opened in limited release in December 1987 and went wide in January 88. It's pretty much a unanimous hit, actually. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both loved it. It currently has a 93% of Rotten Tomatoes. Janet Maslin, we were talking about her review at the New York Times earlier, comically wrote that Moonstruck clearly means to celebrate all things Italian, but, quote, creates the false but persistent impression that most of the people who made it have never been closer to Italy than perhaps Iowa. which is just, it's very funny to me
You
because
love that.
she's not wrong. It's obviously like extremely stereotypical, extremely like, this is how people think New York Italians behave, like slapping and screaming, but they kind of do, A, and B, John Patrick Shanley grew up in the Bronx around a bunch of Irish and Italian people. Like, I do trust him. The film went on to gross over 122 million worldwide on what was a reported budget of 11 to 15 mil. And it cleaned up at the Oscars. Cher won Best Actress. It was a year she wore one of her many amazing Bob Mackie dresses. Olympia Dukakis won Best Supporting Actress. Shanley won Best Screenplay. Jewison was sadly shut out of Best Director.
Libby Dukakis wore one of her fantastic Bob Mackie dresses.
John Patrick Shanley wore one of his many iconic Bob Mackie dresses.
Norman Jewison was shut out despite having turned out in one of his many iconic, fabulous Bob Mackie dresses.
It is sad. All the actors who were interviewed for this, they're, you know, when they talk about all the success for it, and then they're just like, and Norman just sat there. Like,
Aww.
I know. The film is on 7 different American Film Institute best of lists, which might be some kind of a record. And Ebert officially entered it into his Great Movies collection in June 2003. And as of this writing, I have a petition to the Library of Congress to enter it into the National Film Archive. I don't actually, but I'm putting that on my to-do list for tomorrow. It's going to be a big thing for me.
Olivia Dukakis has a cute line about this movie. She said, "It changed my whole life. My daughter was going to college on credit cards when I did that movie. After that, we were able to send our children through college with no problems. Imagine a time when you could pay for a semester at college on a single credit card."
Probably my favorite line, and I read a lot of think pieces about this from the great coronavirus lockdown rewatch era. B.D. McClay wrote at the New Yorker, gave my favorite final thought. Final thoughts. Moonstruck is a comedy, but it's deeply obsessed with death, to the point that it opens in a funeral parlor. It's a romance, but instead of trying to build up its central couple, it takes their sudden and total attraction to one another as an act of God. Nobody in the movie acts reasonably or even normally, and yet it feels completely true to people as they are, ridiculous and passionate, in search of answers and solutions, and taking what they can get, which is usually better than what they thought they wanted. As the film knows, most of the things in life that matter aren't chosen, but sometimes we at least get to love the wrong people, who might just be the right people after all. It's great writing there. I have nothing else to add. Go watch Moonstruck. Go to Cher's Twitter. She's hilarious.
Turns 35 this, for all I know.
It's my age. I was born November 87.
I was born December 87. I think, wait, I want to see what day it was released. December 18th. Wow.
4 days before your birthday. There you have it, folks. Rewatch Moonstruck and wish Jordan a happy birthday all in the same week. This has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.